Hello, I'm Butch, and I like to build ball-jointed action figures and their accessories. I'm going to show you how easy it is to make your own action figure using polymer clay. Not just a statue, but an actual playable toy. In order to start making Suzy Snacktime, the first thing we're going to have to do is start making some beads. There's a video in my playlist that covers how I make the beads using a DIY mold. After I've made all the beads, I also need to make a number of tubes to use as spacers. Now with our tubes and our beads baked, we can go in to start making some of our basic pieces. Clean paper towel is all I use to keep my roller clean. Suzy's got a pretty big old brain bucket on her, so I'm going to slowly build up her cranial unit until I get the size I want for her. I start my hands by making a mitt, concentrating mostly on the form of the thumb. Pairing up beads to make a double knee joint or elbow joint is my next go-to. After baking in my progress, I can wrap the beads and cut those tubes to length to act as a spacer so that both my arms will be the exact same length, both my legs will be the exact same length. If you form a part off the bar and you go to put one on after drilling it out, make sure the hole's a little bigger or it could split. When forming a socket for a bead, you never want to exceed more than half the bead's surface. About a third coverage is usually good enough for a good socket for it to roll in. If you cover more than half the bead, you may have a hard time getting that bead to pop out of the joint after everything's been baked. Each layer I add, I always make sure I use a bacon bond adhesive. For my fingers, I found it easier to fold it over a pin instead of trying to drill that tiny hole out after. It's easier just to fold the pin. Building up the body is a lot easier with that tube structure underneath. Plus, building on the bars means I don't have to touch anything too much. I always start small and add things bit by bit. The legs, it works out real well because I can just add the same muscle shape to each leg in the same spot at the same time. This makes symmetry so much easier to maintain while I'm sculpting. Funny thing is, I was supposed to sculpt a Five Nights at Freddy's character. Oops! Here we'll lose the fingers off that mitt that I didn't pay much attention to at the start, so that we'll be able to put these movable fingers on. Drill out the hand so it's not tight on the bar, because we don't want that to split. I do a lot of shaping by carving. I like to do minimal sanding. I don't like breathing the dust. Now you've probably noticed I go from white through colors, back to white through colors. Each time I go through the colors, I bake and then I start with white again. So you can imagine how many times I've already baked these pieces. Plus, I'm colorblind, so I can only really have one color out at a time, or I get weird colored stuff. With the basic underlying form of the figure already made, now I get to do the fun stuff and go in and make all the different details that make Suzy Snacktime Suzy Snacktime. I could go in and paint a lot of the details in, but I really do try to put most of them in using the polymer clay. Little bits at a time is truly my secret for doing a face. Going through the extra work to actually sculpt the outfit on versus just painting it on is really what makes it for them to seem like a toy afterwards than just a piece of art. At this point here, I've got about 30 hours of work into this figure. But I don't mind putting the hours in, knowing I got something I can play with and pose afterwards. Realistically, most of my dolls take between 40 and 50 hours to make. Now I'm just going to get a few little details out of the way before I perform a little experiment. Using a leather hole punch I got, I'm just going to coat her shin with dots. I'll show you why a little later, after I've baked them on. With her torso all wrapped up in her signature pink, it's time to put those little details on her candy basket. I'm going to squish some white clay between those pre-baked red stripes and some lavender over those dots. Now Suzy's got some big hair, and it's in a style I'm not used to doing. It's pretty chunky, pretty basic, so I'll give it my best. That is some very heavy hair. Giving her her pre-made heart-shaped knee pads before we wrap up the torso so we can start to make the skirt. I took my skirt cutout and I ran a thin red band around the outside, and now with just a little bit of rolling, it will join those two up nicely so that I don't have to paint the band on and it's not going to be chunky. Figuring out how I was going to make the skirt was actually something that took a little bit of time. But now that it's all finished out, I'm really glad I stopped to think about how I was going to make it. And on to the only piece that gets any paint. Because, well, we all know I don't like to paint that much. Giving everything a coat of acrylic gloss will make sure everything looks a little plasticky or metallic. There usually ends up being almost a whole day of just drilling and fitting the parts. My bead video will cover a lot of how to make certain joint beads like the hip ones. And in my playlist is also an elastic video. I'll show you how to make these figure 8 elastics. This is just a debut, a quick overview of how she was made. There is going to be a long form video of this where I show a lot more of the process. Oh, that's just a little embarrassing. I almost forgot to make her cupcake hat. I personally think she's cuter without it. A weapon is in order, so I kept it themed to her character. And let's make it look like she's hit a few things. Now, a little reward for your patience. Let's see how she moves. Holding it has the weight of a vinyl superhero figure. The articulation is pretty smooth, and overall the joints have great mobility. The waist, for not having a full ball joint and just that pivot top, has quite a bit of motion and keeps a very feminine waist. Her arm has exceptional movement, and the elbow joint bends way better than 90. The wrist has quite a bit of swivel to it and can hold things in a very natural looking pose. The hands being able to open and close work great, and because the elastic joint's there, the fingers always have proper tension to hold things. A detachable head and removable hair is about standard for my dolls. Because I prefer her without the cupcake hat, I made sure that it came off and on with a magnet. I made sure that Suzy's Fun Time mallet had matching colors to hers so that, it's got to coordinate, it's got to accessorize. Now, on to the spotlight. If you found this enjoyable or helpful, hit that like, please. And maybe also that subscribe so you know when I have something new come out. Thanks for watching.